Welcome to University Television Presents. I am your host, Joey Oles, and today we're going to be talking to the Dean of Students, Mr. Christian Wuthrich. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Good, I'm glad you were here. So can you tell me a little bit about how you got your start here at BSU?
Sure. Well, I've been in the student affairs business for quite a few years, and I had a really wonderful undergraduate experience when I went to the University of Idaho. And from there, I just started work on my campus. And I began as a Greek advisor, working with fraternities and sororities, and then in student conduct, and then finally as a dean of students at Washington State University. Well, when I was there, I also completed my PhD. And then this job became available when they reinstituted the Dean of Students position, and I jumped at it. I love Boise, I love the school, and I was looking for a winning football team.
Well, you came to the right place. So what kind of got you into higher education? Like, why did you choose to go that route?
You know, I look at higher education and my job in student affairs as sort of a helping profession, and I enjoy teaching. And I enjoy working with students and problem solving. And when I graduated with an undergraduate degree in teaching, I was going to be a high school history teacher, working on media activities at a high school. That was my passion. And as I got into my teaching experience, I just didn't quite enjoy it. But what I did enjoy was I enjoyed working on my college campus, working with people who were involved in the fraternity and sorority area. And I kind of felt it was a calling. I enjoyed the work life. I enjoyed the work hours. It didn't feel like work at all. In fact, it felt like a hobby. I got paid to do my hobby.
Well, that's great. That's fantastic. So what does the Dean of Students do here on campus?
Well, I should point out that deans of students are different on each campus, and they tend to reflect the needs of the campus that the person is at.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. So here at Boise State, my job is to be an advocate for students, also to be a person who works with students who are involved in the conduct process, and to supervise a bunch of service areas like the Gender Equity Center, Veteran Services, and the Educational Access Center, along with the programs that are in my office, and to make sure that those receiving those services, those participating in those activities, have a good advocate and one who's making sure that resources are deployed properly and in their best interest.
So if somebody has some kind of problem with their academic status or something in academic honesty, is that where they go to the Dean of Students?
Yeah, I have a staff person who works in academic areas as well. But even if you have a challenge or concern with a faculty member, you feel like your rights aren't being respected, there's people in my office, if not me, who would help with navigating the processes, advocating for you as a student, making sure you understand the policies so that you can effectively navigate that. And the way I like to think of it is I think of it as a partnership. And we have these partnerships with students, hoping that as we work with them, they find ways to connect, find ways to get involved, and we learn from them as well. And in that learning, we can have better outcomes for students, better policies, better processes, and it's a win-win.
That's fantastic. That's so cool. So what kind of student resources are available from your office?
We have a couple of really big direct student resources. First and foremost, we have a student help and support system where students who are needing extra advocacy, students who are having challenges, maybe meeting their own basic needs like housing or for food scarcity, we have services around that. We have services to help students access programs on campus, whether it's tutoring programs, making sure they can get into tutoring, or maybe they need legal assistance. We sponsor in my office the ASBSU Student Legal Advisor, where students can come and obtain unlimited half-hour appointments with an attorney if they have concerns about legal matters, both big and small. So those are just but a few of the programs that are happening out of my office.
That's cool. So you talked a little bit about food insecurity. Can you touch a little bit more? I think I've heard that we have a food pantry here on campus. Can you tell me a little bit more, how that kind of got started?
Yeah. Well, food insecurity is a really big problem across the country, and Boise State is no different than many other urban institutions where we have people who come to us from all kinds of different backgrounds. And we know education is expensive. We know that paying rent is expensive. People have got to pay transportation costs, and even costs that once before were born, different, like say your cell phone. It used to be you had a phone in your house, right? And there was one number to call. You had no extra expense for a phone. You had less expenses for certain things like clothing, So as costs have expanded, as education costs have increased, and as students come to us from various backgrounds, we noticed that there was a need for a food pantry. And for some time now, we've been working with a variety of people on campus and in our community to develop a food pantry. And as my office transitioned from the Norco building over to the campus school, we thought we have room, let's open one up. And so we did in partnership with ASBSU.
That's fantastic. So who's eligible to use this food pantry?
Any Boise State student can come to the food pantry. And what we've developed is not necessarily where you come in and you just grab a whole bunch of kitchen supplies. We developed actually nutritious meal plans. So when you come to the food pantry in the Dean of Students office, you can choose amongst the various meal plans that are offered, and we provide the ingredients for all of these meals along with the cooking instructions. So when you come, you shouldn't expect to see a whole row of soup, a whole row of top ramen noodles, and a whole row of food that someone didn't want on their bottom shelf of their pantry. You'll come in and you'll see tuna, you'll see other types of fish, you'll see other proteins, you'll see rice, beans, even cooking staples like oils and spices. All because we want to make sure that students who are accessing that food pantry are not only getting fed, meaning nourished, but also eating healthy. And then we also, within the food pantry, have other resources for off-campus programs, resources for on-campus programs, including things like tax assistance. So it is a full source activity you can get from our food pantry, all designed to help people kind of eat healthy and be made aware of ways that they can continue to advocate for themselves.
That's fantastic. I didn't know that you guys made it such a health-conscious effort. That's really cool, and I think it's something that we should all really be starting towards. Yeah. So how do we donate? Do we go online and find what we need and where to give it to?
Well, actually right now we have a fabulous partnership with Albertsons, the grocery store. And they're providing us with a whole number of things, including almost all the meals that we're providing to our students. We're rolling out in the fall some specific things that we're going to ask students and faculty and staff to donate towards, and that'll be directed at the meal program itself. And so we'll have a list of items that are helpful, we think, that students will eat, that match our meal plans, and so that when we take in food, we're taking in food that we can actually use. We're not trying to just take in food in order just to dump bags and bags of food onto people that may not even be eaten. And that's a real big problem sometimes with food pantries where, if you're not serving an entire community of diverse community like the city of Boise per se, it can be hard to anticipate people's meal preferences, food allergies, ethnic needs and religious needs. And so we're trying to balance all that. And as we roll the pantry out, we'll be having instructions for donations, how to donate and where to donate. And that'll happen in the fall.
Super, that's cool. That's really, really fantastic. So can we touch a little bit more? I have written down the CARE program. What is that? What does that help in our community?
The CARE program is a very important program for our campus. But unfortunately, it's born from a need to combat school violence. And CARE programs were started at colleges all across the country following some school shootings and tragedies, most notably the Virginia Tech shootings back in the early 2000s. And so here on this campus, we've always had a program, but about 6 years ago, President Custra essentially revamped the way the program was going to be rolled out, and we titled it CARE. And he then appointed individuals from various offices on campus, Human Resource Services, Student Counseling Services. There's someone there from our attorney's office, the Dean of Students office, Residence Life has a representative there, and our Public Safety office is representative there. The program is designed to support people who are experiencing trauma or crisis. Perhaps they're feeling about self-harm. Perhaps they're feeling they want to harm others. It's also designed to help people who are just in sort of your day-to-day crises. Maybe they have some anxiety and other challenges that are prohibiting them from attending class. But the biggest point of it is it's to try to identify where we might have points of violence on campus. And thankfully, we think we do a pretty good job in supporting folks so we don't get to that particular point. But if we do sense there's a challenge or concern through a report from the community, through contact with the police or a staff member on campus, we then deploy resources to contact the individual in question and to make sure that we provide them services or identify the crisis and try to de-escalate that crisis.
I think that's fantastic and really important in this day and age to have some kind of system in place like that. Kind of sad that that's how it has to be, but it does make me feel better as a student to know that I have my faculty behind me and they have a program ready to keep me safe and to help me out. Because I've been to the counseling services and it really did help in the middle of like finals and midterms,
Yeah.
I get a lot of anxiety. So it really did help for me to have a place to go and talk to somebody. So I really enjoy the programs we have here. It's been really helpful, I would say.
Yeah, and I think I would say too that we encourage everybody to report. You can go on to the website, care.boisestate.edu, and you can be a student, you can be a faculty member, you can be just a person who lives in Boise, a parent or a family member of someone who's a student, or an employee or a faculty member. So we take care reports of every single person who's interacting with us on campus. And we want people to report. If you see something, if you suspect something that's just quite off or suspicious, or you hear things, we want to know about it. And we won't run people over to make sure that we're cutting every corner or tackling everything, but we'll examine it thoroughly. We'll contact the parties that are involved and make sure that we're doing all we can within the law and while respecting someone's privacy to keep our campus safe.
That's fantastic. That's something I really admire about us here. So we're talking about like our safety. What about our rights? How does the Dean of Students Office help with our rights as students, as human beings, as citizens?
Yeah. Well, students have all the rights that non-students have. In fact, in some cases, due to the nature of an educational community, students have more rights on campus than they would in town. Mainly because we look at this campus, the space we operate in and educate in, as a place to be expressive, as a place to learn and grow. And so to that end, we have a whole series of policies and rules that promote free speech, that respect free speech, and in some cases, unfortunately, respect free speech that many people would find objectionable. Which is probably the hardest part of the Dean of Students job, where people are saying things that the majority of people on campus would say, that's horrendous, that's horrific, that's disgusting speech, that could be discriminatory in one person's mind. But we're called from the Constitution and through various rulings in the courts to respect or protect or at least allow, depending on where it's coming from, people's right to speak. And what my office does is we both protect that and also advocate for people who don't like what someone is saying to counter it, to provide a counter argument, to provide a counter protest or a counter lecture. Bring in people who you think would be supportive of good news, of good information that students would want to hear. And in doing that, we're educating our community. Perhaps, at least we hope, from an educational perspective, that if we countered a bad idea with a good idea, the person with a bad idea we might win that person over, help them grow and understand, and be more polite, more open, more tolerant, accepting, whatever word might be appropriate for that case.
I appreciate how you're trying to kind of create more of a dialogue here instead of just shutting somebody's ideas down, shutting down their speech, instead giving them not a platform, but giving them the opportunity to speak, but then being able to counter back through that. Like, do you find it really difficult to determine what is too far, what's something that's not technically your freedom of speech, but being actually harmful towards somebody else? If that's...
I don't think that most of us on campus, students or faculty or staff, find it hard to determine what's hurtful. It's probably stopping that urge as a human to prevent that other person from harming somebody else verbally or promoting ideas that we find abhorrent. Yeah. What's the hardest part is even for things we don't like, respecting that person's right to say it. And then when we're countered with people who say, hey, wait a minute, that person's out on the quad saying this, or I just read this paper or this thing that said that, I find that horrific or offensive. The best part that we can play in that role is to tell the person who's feeling like they've been trampled on or that speech is harming them, say, what can we do to help you counter that argument? How can we help you advance your argument? Do you know your resources on campus? Now, I'll tell you, there are limitations to speech. There are some specific limitations that are not covered in the Constitution, and we talk about that in terms of things that cause harm, that advocate violence. Someone speaking from a platform saying, we ought to go and attack those people over there. Or we need to pass laws, and I'm not letting people in my club that look like this. Yeah. We wouldn't allow that. So there are limits and there are protections to speech. And for us, on top of what I mentioned, is also the on-campus rule about disruption. So if someone wants to go out on the quad and talk, get a megaphone out, and start trying to disrupt instruction, and they're saying stuff that's offensive, well, we may not tackle the offensive part because that's protected, but we'd say, you know what? you got to cut it out, you got to stop. We're going to kick you off campus because you're disrupting our classroom. You're disrupting people's rights to learn. So the general rule is that my rights end where yours begin. And so if I'm preventing you from getting an education, if I'm stopping you from entering a building, if I'm preventing you from attending a concert or a class or going to a football game, then I violated your rights. So we do have limits. But thankfully, on this campus, we generally have some pretty decent speakers. Even though people might say some of that stuff's bad, most people who come to speak on our campus understand the law and understand that there's limits to speech.
Yeah.
But I'll say one more thing about speech. If someone's going to say offensive speech or do offensive things, then they probably shouldn't be all that upset if people take up action against that, call them out. There's no protection in that regard.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that is crucial. So whenever everybody gets involved in a speaking activity or a protest activity, they need to understand that there are responsibilities to that. And we're gonna do all we can to protect them. We're gonna do all we can to protect all of our students in terms of policies and laws. But at the end of the day, you make a fool of yourself, you say something embarrassing, or you do something you regret later, that's on you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I really enjoyed that. So one last thing, what is our Student Emergency Fund? What does that do for students here on campus?
We've been fortunate over the last, probably 5 years to have an emergency fund that's sponsored by the campus, sponsored by our central administration. And we use monies given to us by the school to grant students who are in crisis or in emergency aid, free money. Say you have a doctor's bill that you can't pay, but if you were to pay it, you'd have to not buy books for the coming semester. Or you are having an emergency with your car and you need to repair your vehicle so you can get back and forth to campus. And because you don't live on a bus line, not having a car would stop you from coming to school. Or perhaps, your roommate moves out in the middle of the semester and you can't pay your rent. So you can come to the Dean of Students office and you can present us with those facts and we grant you this money. And the money is yours to use. We don't ask for you to pay it back. And we also work with you at that point to talk about budgeting, talking about how would one manage crises, or even to provide you with moral support or resource support, say to counseling services or to the food pantry if it were, to make sure that whatever's happening in your life isn't going to be the thing that stops you from completing your semester and or finishing your degree.
That's really cool. It sounds like the Dean of Students is something that a lot of students may not know about, but it actually is a very nice resource for us to have. It's going to really help us continue in our college education, because as a student I can say that a lot of random things happen in my life. Things happen outside of school, and it really does affect my education, affect my ability to pay attention and stay engaged. But just knowing that we have this Dean of Students, we have this office that is for the students, it's a kind of a voice for the students. I think that's really cool, very interesting. So where is the student office? Where is the office?
The Dean of Students is in the campus school. I like to say I'm in the old principal's office. I don't know that or not, but I feel like I am. We're in the back of the campus school, right behind the ILC. And if you go to the art department a lot, or if you've been into the creative writing office, our office is right next door to them. You can also call us or look us up on the website. We want to promote the use of the Dean of Students office in all times, good and bad times. We want to hear students' successes. We want to hear students' challenges. But mostly we want to try to normalize the fact that within life, people have crises and things happen. That doesn't mean that people have to forgo education or forgo that project or quit their job. And so one of the bigger goals of my office is to basically try to work with students, all of our students, to understand that life isn't a smooth sailing, easy seas. But when there are turbulence, when there are problems, a snowstorm or rain or whatever, that you just need to keep going forward. You need to get your resources organized. You need to ask for help and support from your friends or your family or a loved one, and cobble together those resources and keep pushing forward, because the crisis will pass. And with each successive issue you tackle, the better you become. And before you know it, when you see a crisis or an issue, you blow right by it. It doesn't impact you anymore. And that's part of learning. So if you have struggles, that's okay. If you have successes, that's even better. And we want people to understand that the goal is much bigger around getting an education. It's not just about today or tomorrow, but about your life or your career and what it can do for you, your significant other, your family, and how education kind of pays it forward.
Well, that's fantastic. I really do enjoy. I think that the Dean of Students is something that we all need to, I need to go to at least just to check it out, talk about our issues, because I know a lot of students here that really kind of bottle it up and don't really talk about it. And it is really going to affect their education later in life. Like I'm going to be a senior now, and it just took me this long to really figure out that I can't do it all by myself. And it's totally okay for me to ask for help and to get help from people. And like that's why you're here. You're here to help. You're here to help me get through school. So
Well, thank you.
yes, no, I think it's a wonderful time, and I think it's so interesting for us to have this on campus. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
It's
Pleasure.
a great time. Yes, yes. Well, that is it from us here. We thank you for watching, and we're going to see you guys next time.